At the start of the 1980s, two British bands, Regular Music and The Lost Jockey, took minimal music and developed it into a more dramatic, beat-oriented sound. They added amplification to a mainly classical setup and focused on an energetic and exciting performance style. I'm going to be talking about Regular Music today, but obviously The Lost Jockey deserve attention in any future conferences. For young composers in the 1970s, it was natural to think about a way to integrate rock and jazz with more classical and experimental styles. This could be quite a complex ambition, but minimal music had the benefit of giving a clear starting point for a new style. It focused on simple concepts with a fresh approach, and there were some very good models. Terry Riley, Steve Reich, and Gavin Bryars had all written some great pieces. Phil Glass was less well known in the UK at that time, but Dave Smith was a key figure in making the music available. Regular Music was formed with the idea of playing this minimal music and using it as a springboard for new compositions. The founder members all went here to Goldsmiths College: Jeremy Peyton Jones, Andrew Poppy and Helen Ottaway. Other performers from Goldsmiths were Alex Kolkowski and Alex Maguire, and then later on Maria Lamburn. There was also a Royal Holloway College connection. Andrew had been there for a year. We'd had some excellent conversations about new music. He invited Jeff Warren and Dave Powell, and then later myself and Mark Emerson to join. It was great to be involved in such an exciting project. Regular Music's early concerts took place in art galleries, art centres and art colleges. They seemed receptive to this new style of music. Then in September 1982 we took part in the Dial M for Music series at the ICA, in a concert with the Michael Nyman Band. At this stage we were playing Jeremy's Purcell Manoeuvres and Music for Film, both very interesting and accomplished pieces. Then in 1982 we gave the first performance of his Idyllic Rhythms, which really felt like it broke new ground. Let's take a look at it. Idyllic Rhythms is based upon the harmonies of a passage in Wagner's Siegfried Idyll. Jeremy says, in the original, the harmonic movement is fast and sequential, and I have significantly slowed this down. The effect is to greatly increase the concentration on rich harmonies, rather like holding a magnifying glass to one cadential passage. I believe the original Wagner is this passage. So let's take a look at what Jeremy does with this. Here's Regular Music in the Gateway Studio recording from 1983, which hasn't been heard much at all in the intervening 40 years. Thanks to Ian for digitising Jeremy's tape. There are some incredible lush harmonies, quite rare in his output, but what's most noticeable are the rhythms, as in the title, and the energy that they unleash. They were quite radical at the time, not necessarily the paper values, but the emphatic beat and the precision needed to play them. We certainly had some fun with this swirling, disorientating sound on the first performance. It broke down and Jeremy had to restart. In 1982 this was something different. We were all very impressed. The piece has good examples of what I nowadays call harmonic beats. That is, strong beats of different durations that form a harmony with one another. Whilst you could call this polymeter, I think harmonic beats is a good term, since this style is allied to beat music deriving from a rock influence. Beat music being a 60s term related to the music from Liverpool. We're going to see more examples later. In this same 1982 concert we gave the first performance of my Neapolitan Sixth, which was in 3 parts, each quite different from one another, showing varying ways of treating the same material. A foreshadowing, if you like, of the remix culture that was to follow. Part 3 was a fast number, with dueling saxophones in the middle section, which we played a lot and used to end concerts with. This is part 2, which has the ensemble gradually awakening. But it's part 1 that has the most rhythmic interest, and uses the idea of harmonies of meter. The main theme of the piece, a syncopated riff in 4/4, is expanded and contracted. And the top note is changed to form melodic phrases and decorate the harmony. So far it's a sort of minimal additive concept, a bit like something by Philip Glass. But one day I improvised around combinations of these. The result was really exciting. So then it became a matter of making a clear form without losing that excitement. I began with a section in unison rhythm to set out the stall, then introduced the harmonies of meter. This chart gives an idea of how those work. Piano 1 fits within piano 2. For example, the top lines show 3 bars of 4/4 in piano 1 against 2 bars of 6/4 in piano 2, and so on. This is from later in the piece. It's Helen and me, with Charles improvising an accompaniment. In 1998, I returned to the idea for my track Chill to This, giving it a much more soulful sound with Mike Henry singing. The Dial M for Music series was called Systems and All Sorts. Let's hear what Jeremy has to say about regular music's use of systems.
I don't exactly like the word systems music. We are not exactly systemic. The systems are not very rigorous, like they were, for instance, with Philip Glass and Steve Reich. And so it is moved on from systems. It is post-systems music, if you like. And it incorporates many other elements. One of the interesting elements that I find is 19th century music, the very grand harmonic style of composers like Richard Wagner, which I use a lot in my music.
He also said this about composing for the group.
Jonathan and I write most of the pieces, and the music is very much affected by the people in the group. For instance, we made the addition 2 years ago of a drummer, which is Charles Hayward from This Heat and Camberwell Now. and also an electric guitarist. And that changed the group quite a lot from a slightly more classical and quieter feel to more bordering on rock music, on that kind of side of music. Later still, last year in fact, we added Mary Phillips, a singer, and so we added a lot of vocal parts to pieces that already existed.
It's certainly right to mention the influence of the group on the music, so let's take a look at the rest of the band. The personnel has changed over time, but if we take the album lineup, Jeremy has mentioned Charles. He was a massive part of the sound, an amazing drummer who helped inspire a new direction. Sarah played saxophone and brought a very rich bass clarinet sound which worked really well. You'll hear it on the final piece I'm going to play. Maria was a composition student, contributed a very interesting piece to the Wake and continues to compose. Helen was part of the group from the start and has really developed her composition skills. She contributed a piece to the conference, which was sung by Melanie Pappenheim. Myself, Jeremy. Mary's voice really lent something to the sound. She had, and still has, an ability to sing very pure high notes, which you'll hear in the extracts I'm about to play. Joss needs no introduction to this audience. She's a composer for film and has done many theatre pieces. She records for Peter Gabriel's label and contributed the music to Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. And Joss will be on the panel later. Dave's tuba added a real warmth to the bass of the sound. He played with the London Symphony Orchestra and also the jazz big band Loose Tubes. And in fact Ashley Slater and John Eacott came from that band to join Regular Music 2 later on. Bron is now a professor at Lancaster University and is involved in devising performances with a very creative approach to issues of technological and cultural change. It was a privilege to work with such a talented group. 1983 brought a new simplicity and aggression to Jeremy's style, and this can be heard in The Third Dream. He says, "It was part of a sequence of pieces that take a dream world as their starting point, and as such, although rhythmically very precise, it represents a far more fluid approach to structure. It was also one of his first pieces to prominently feature kit drumming and electric guitar." He was developing long arcs to his music, so it's difficult to give a quick flavour of this piece. But here is the point in the development, where as the tension builds, you'll hear an exciting change. All the band have been playing in 4/4 for some time, and now they move to 3, while the drummer remains in 4. And here's the return to the main theme, which has an emphatic repeated pulse in 4, followed by the voice and band emphasising groups of 3. Again, this is an example of harmonic beats, but also this is sparse 2-part writing, animated by repeated notes, using very dramatic intervals and rhythms. Charles Hayward's group This Heat were an obvious influence. Here's a similar sparse sound in their Twilight Furniture from 1976. I actually based my piece Shudder on this rhythm. We played it at the Bloomsbury Festival in 1985. Here's a snippet of the first performance. What was prompting the move towards more energy and aggression in the music? Partly the excitement of the musical material. The adrenaline really flew when we played. Also, we were probably picking up on the atmosphere of the times. Regular music were not overtly political, but it's worth reminding ourselves of the early Thatcher years, which created such a tense atmosphere in the country. This sense of energy at the time was echoed by two young American composers, Rhys Chatham and Branca, who Jeremy and I saw at the ICA and Riverside Studios. Branca explored microtonality and designed his own instruments. Interestingly, according to the internet, no recordings exist of Symphony No. 4, which he played that evening. It is the one missing work by Branca, which I find hard to believe. Still, if it's true, good job I made a recording. It's not very good quality, but I guess anything is better than nothing. You'd have to turn it right up to get the full effect. It was ear-bleedingly loud. We were getting reviews by now, and in '84 we played a multimedia work by Jeremy and Steve Littman at the ICA. And we did an Arts Council tour of the UK, which included Bryars, Zalewski's Gazebo and Frederick Rzewski's Coming Together, as well as our own pieces. In 1985 we went to Reims in France for a concert, Musique de Traverse. At that point, crossover was not a tainted word. Then came a real break. That same year we were invited by Jeff Travis of Rough Trade to record an album. This was a great experience. I remember having a conversation with Jeremy at Gateway Studios in '83 about how well produced pop music was. It was going to be interesting to see what we could do. Recording took place at Falconer Studios in Camden with some remixing at Air Studios. This was in the pre-digital era, and MIDI was also in its infancy. So we laid down tracks individually, and this required the same kind of committed and precise playing as live performances. Mixing was also a performance, with many hands on the faders. The album got some nice reviews here and in France. Very inspired and beautiful. I was very happy with the way my piece Hippolyte and Aricie turned out. Regular Music gave a great performance, and it was amazing to mix on a big analogue desk. The piece was inspired by an unusual chord sequence in Rameau's opera. It occurs as a dramatic descent in the Trio of the Fates. It's so brief it passes by in 5 bars. I actually got the sequence from Donald Grout's History of Western Music. I was drawn to its fatalistic simplicity. It's made up of only 2 steps, which bring to mind the movement of a knight on a chessboard. Or perhaps you could visualize it in relation to Leonhard Euler's Tonnettes, which, for those of you not familiar, is a diagram from 1739, almost exactly the same date as Rameau's opera, showing tonal space. The first 2 chord changes are these basic moves on the chart, which are then copied into a descending sequence. I colour the chords with added notes, often an added 4th on the major and an added 2nd on the minor, which I love as they add intensity. You'll also hear plenty of beats harmonising in this example. Recomposing and reimagining are such vogue concepts now. It's interesting to think we were doing this 40 years ago. I'll just take a few moments to go into Jeremy's later work. He wrote a lot of experimental theatre music for groups such as Impact Theatre, Lumiere and Son, the director Hilary Westlake, and we also toured the UK in 1987 with a performance called The Sleep, which had Sarah Jane Morris in the lead role. Do please take a look at his website. It's all listed there, and I know the family are keeping it to a very high standard. And I'll just say a little bit about what I've been up to since regular music. My main original contribution, I think, is my musical translation technique, which gives the composer the ability to move between simple and complex melody and harmony, all related to the same subject. I formed a quartet to play my music, which includes some of the regular music pieces that never got performed, and I've also developed these rhythmic ideas from the regular music style, the idea of harmonic beats. I draw your attention, I think, to this piece Chagall, which has a beat of 3 against a beat of 8, then 7, then 5 as a recurring pattern throughout the piece. It's quite sophisticated, but it doesn't sound as if there's anything really complex going on. I've talked quite a bit about the compositions for regular music, but a band is so much more than that. No matter how clever AI gets, it will never replicate the sense of theatre, the commitment shown, and all the experiences you get when a band plays. What is a film script without actors to bring it to life? And then there's real life that interacts with that process. Let's end with some photos of regular music that I've dug out from under the dusty eaves at my house. Most haven't seen the light of day for 40 years, and some have never been seen by the band. I'm glad I hung on to them. And it would only be fitting to pay tribute to Jeremy as he's no longer with us. Something that's still very hard to believe. He was a friend and an inspired band leader. I think I can speak for all the band when I say how much we enjoyed working together and treasure the memories. The gigs, the parties, playing in a bull ring in the south of France, the theatre work, releasing a record. He was so dynamic and almost like a dad to the band. We all miss him. Here's Jeremy's piece, The Fourth Door, from the theatre production A Place in Europe, played by Regular Music and recorded in 1985. The title refers to the doors of Bluebeard's castle, and the fourth door is called Garden.